So what brings you to Heredia? It's been a while since we saw you.
Yeah, well, you know how this goes. I normally come in when the bosses cannot make it for some reason or another. In this case, Pedro was supposed to come, but he has a different appointment, so I offered to come, in fact. I raised my hand.
Yes, I heard from Ignacio as well. He said, I can join you on Zoom if you want to. I said, no, if Antonio's in, we don't need you. I mean, who is he anyway? Oh, yes, he's one of the bosses. No, but it's good to see you, and it's nice to have the sort of different people in with their different specialities, as I tried to say earlier.
Yes, that's true.
And you are kind of focused on property, but you'll know the general law anyway. Now, what they wanted to just give us a heads up about is the TI renewals, which we did. A nice little in-focus bit with Ignacio before. But just a reminder to people too, because they don't send you a letter to say it's...
No, they should, though. Shouldn't they? But no, they don't do it for the nationals either. So when it's time to renew your national identity document, your DNI, they also don't send you a letter or your driving license. They should, though. Yeah, they could do an email notification. That's quite a good point. Yeah, well, yeah, of course. So if you are a foreigner and you are here with a TIE scheme because you're British or from any other non-European country, then yes, you have to be very aware of the date of which your TI card is going to expire. You can renew your card up to 60 days before and up to 90 days later. But later can come with a fine, with penalties or problems in some cases. So you should go case by case in this. It's not the same coming here with a student visa than a non-lucrative visa, than a pre-Brexit scheme. All those TIE, the cards are roughly the same, but the conditions for the cards are not. So you have to be quite careful.
Sure, and because it could either have been a 5-year one or I got a 10-year one somehow, I think, because I'd been here a little bit longer beforehand with the original document.
That's right.
But it may have come up because we're that far in post-Brexit.
Yes, of course.
If you got it in 2019, 2020,
right,
could be up.
Yeah, if that's exactly it. That's why part of this campaign is, because now most of the TI cards that were issued pre-Brexit or during Brexit are now going to expire. So there's a huge wave, or in this case, British people wanting to renew the TIEs. You can renew up to 60 days before, but that doesn't mean that you should plan 60 days before when you're going to renew it. You should plan ahead and try and make arrangements for the renewal of the TIE as soon as you can. Just not to go over the limit, just in case. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to get the paperwork, particularly the padrón. That can be tricky. And your old padrón is not worth it. Yes, you have to get a certificate that can only be 3 months old. So that means that you have to get a new padrón certificate just for the TI renewal.
Even if you haven't moved, if it's the same address.
Yeah, even if it's the same address, still has to be tops 3 months old.
Okay. Now, there's a bit of a change there, because when Ignacio was talking about it, he was making out, and it did seem strange, that you couldn't apply before it had expired.
Yes,
you couldn't have an appointment before it had expired.
That's what's happening now. Even though the law says that you can do it up to 60 days before, it's becoming more and more difficult to get appointments before. And there's a restriction here in the Comunidad Valenciana up to the point in which you have to renew. In any case, I still advise people to get everything ready before. You get it ready, in the 70 going to expire mark, and then you get into the queue for the appointments. Because that's the other difficult thing, besides getting the padrón, is actually getting an appointment. It can be quite difficult. And there is 2 reasons for that. One is quite mundane. Well, there's a lot of people, isn't it? So the system cannot
all at once. Yeah.
Again, we said that we are on a wave of renewal. So there's a lot of people that want to renew now the TI, and obviously they are clogging the appointment system. There's a limited number of appointments per day. But there's also another reason for that, and it's... Well, there's been some hacking into the system.
We talked about this as well. The little bot goes in and blocks out all the appointments as soon as they go up on the government website. And they took down a gang that was doing it, but we were saying that there's probably others, ready to step in, even if they weren't already doing it.
Yes, of course. That's right. This is one thing is the other. They obviously, the government is up to date with these, and they try to block it. But, the people that work in IT and work for the bad guys in this case, they always manage to find different ways of doing this, and that's done normally to sell the appointments on the black market.
Yes, and people might be tempted to do it if they were having to wait so long, but they should be free, these appointments. You shouldn't have to pay for them. That's the key.
The appointments themselves are completely free, and they should remain so, because it is a public service. However, being tempted and going to the black market to buy the appointments really is not a solution for the problem, because what you're doing is fueling the fire.
And also, it might just be a complete scam, and the appointment doesn't exist.
Well, yeah,
so you've got to be careful.
Yes, and they're relatively easy to fake. the appointment, because the proof of the appointments is not like super secure, and you're only going to find when you go, when you're good faith, you go to the appointment itself, and then the police doesn't have you on the list. And if you're not on the list, then you may have the application proof, but if you're not, the application goes both ways. It also gets recorded onto the system. So if they don't have you on the access list, then you're going to wait outside with the rest of them.
Sure. Okay. And your little team there, they're used to doing these. You see, you're doing loads on a daily basis, I think. So it's all in hand. You've got good contacts with the police. It's Connie, is it, that goes along?
Yes, that's right. Yes. We have a specialist department on foreign affairs, which is comprised of several people, including Connie, and we've got Tamsin as well getting the appointments. So, Well, there's plenty of people in Pellicer and Heredia, because we are very well aware that getting appointments for anything, really, NIEs, Padron, TIE cards, QE, everything, is getting more and more difficult as years go by. So all of that slows or stops applications for residency, purchase of property, applying for loans, all of those kinds of stuff. So, we have to try and avoid the clock as much as we want, as much as we can.
Well, as I said, we have that in depth. It was like a special bit that we did, and it's up on our YouTube channel with Ignacio from BayRadio, just about the whole process, because it's a lot easier, the renewal, than the initial application. A lot quicker, but you still have to do see have your padron, as you say.
Yes. And getting the appointment.
Yes, exactly, in the first place. Yeah, so leave it to someone else to maybe see what's available. But if you're struggling, get in touch. Now then, if someone's living here long term, they'll be looking for somewhere to live. That's my very thin way of getting around to talking about property, which we can start talking about here. We'll take a break as well and then come back and do it in depth in a bit. But what sort of cases are you generally working on? Now, you've told us before about somewhere, and this is very common, where somebody will spot a place they like the look of and actually just fall in love with it and say, right, I want to take it, quickly as possible. But you've got to sort of say, whoa, hang on, let's get this looked at properly. And it's becoming a major issue now by the sounds of it.
Yes. In fact, this is the thing. This is a pattern, and this is a very personal opinion, but it is a pattern I've been noticing, and I've checked with some colleagues at the firm and, other colleagues on other law firms. And I think we all agree, even though, again, it's mainly my opinion. I think we are on the bottom of the barrel situation, right? So there's really not that many properties for sale on a given day in a specific area, particularly if you look for something very particular. And there may be not that many. And most of the good ones, the ones that are nice price and really nice value, they're gone. Still deals coming in, but normally they go out quite quickly. So you may find yourself looking at properties that look nice or maybe don't look nice, and they have an attractive price. Even the property really looks nice and the price is good, we've found out that normally there's a hidden problem somewhere, either with the paperwork or where the property itself has termites. We've seen that. There's parts of the property that are not declared. The property is illegal or it has a demolition order. I've seen it all. So I'm finding a pattern and more clients that do not manage to buy the first property they select. So you come to Spain, you look at properties, you select a property, make an offer, which gets accepted. You get the lawyer involved, and then the lawyer tells you, well, the property looks nice, but this red flag that you've got here. And then quite more commonly than not, the client decides to move to the next property in the list. So I've had a client that have 2 or 3 times they've tried to buy a property until they find one that matches both things. You like it, obviously. It's the price is acceptable, is on your price range or whatever you like. And if it has a problem, it's something we can sort out one way or another.
Yeah, so in some of these areas, because the demand is so high, if something is there and it's maybe been available for a little while, you've got to ask yourself, well, why is that not gone?
Correct. That is exactly right.
It's a bit like a second-hand car. You see one that's been there ages, you think, there must be something wrong with this because they haven't sold it and it's a pretty good price.
That's right.
If the price is good, you've got to dig a bit deeper.
Yeah, correct. No, you're absolutely right. If the price is good and the location, the rest of the property looks fine and it hasn't gone out in a while, then you should wonder yourself. But anyway, there is a lot of properties which have problems that can be fixed at some cost, maybe, which may be paid by the seller or maybe, paid by the buyer. But if it's something before you buy the property, it's fine. Let's imagine you find a property that you like. It's up to 200,000 euros, right? And you say, woof, the price is really good. And you look at it, and the problem is it has this and that and this pending to be done, and that's going to cost you 5,000 euros. Then you can fight with the seller for that. Maybe the seller agrees and to pay for that, or maybe not. But then if you think that your budget is, the property is worth 205, then you put it, consider like costs of doing business, and that's it. But that's because how much it's going to cost you. If you knew that instead of 5, the problem cannot be sorted out, or it's going to cost you 50, maybe you wouldn't decide to buy it.
Right.
So that's why you need the legal representation. You need your independent lawyer to give you, to tell you what is what, right? To tell you if it's going to be 5, if it's going to be 50, or if it can be sorted out, or if it cannot be sorted out.
That's good if you've got an exact quote and someone's looked at it properly. Then you take that, get that off the asking price. It's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, of course.
Negotiation.
Or just agree with the seller that costs are going to be borne by the seller, or you buy it with a discount, or there's a thousand solutions for that, provided that you know what's happening with the problem and what's the extent of the problem, right? Again, I will insist. I had a case, a recent case of a client that tried to buy 2 properties. Poor guy, excellent guy, but he was just unlucky. The properties he fell in love with, they had problems, and it was not because he was a client that didn't want to spend too much money or anything like that. No. He just was looking for a property that he liked for, I think, a reasonable price range. Anyway, he finally found one in Catral, and he sent it to me, and I contacted the other lawyer, and he sent me instantly an urban report, which is unusual, but like really nice for the other lawyer. He's done part of the work. He already got the report, and then I looked at it, and the color drained from my face.
Right.
On the urban report said that the house was was due for demolition. And it was an order for demolition, which was appealed by the current owner, and it was denied in the appeal. So it looks like it was going to go in force, And then, I told the client obviously was flabbergasted. And then I contacted the lawyer to what about this? But this is because of this area. And then, talking with the lawyer and doing my own research, and then I found out that, it had a demolition order, but it was older than 15 years ago. It was never executed, and now the house is immune for the demolition order because there was a problem with a corruption in the area.
Right.
I know. Like 20 years ago, licenses to build a property were issued illegally in a small promotion, a small urbanization in a small town in the countryside, and it was something that only a few people knew. It was very well known on the town, but from the outside, outsiders look, the property is a absolute deal breaker, no go. But once you take a look at it, you discover that in fact it's something that can be sorted out. So the client was able to proceed and buy this house that had a standing demolition order successfully with no problems. So even sometimes when the problems seem too dire, they may be not so, right? Spain is a strange place, and you can find solutions for almost anything.
But also on the opposite side of it, it might not be sort of visible cracks and that sort of thing. But there's problems with paperwork, as you say. It could have been built illegally, or just massive structural things that maybe you can't see.
Yes, of course. A structural thing is not something
superficially
a lawyer can sort out, because I cannot visit the property and know that. But if it's a problem with the paperwork, then we'll find out. In this case, there was a big problem, but the seller was upfront about it, which is good. But even if they weren't, we could have found it sooner or later. The advantage of them being upfront about it is we were able to sort it out quickly and successfully to everyone's satisfaction. If it's something that I discover on my own research, then probably the outcome wouldn't be as good, because the point that you have when you dig out something so dangerous as, by the way, the house that you're going to buy is going to be gone any day now. They're going to come with a demolition order and just crumble it with a wrecking ball any day now. Of course, the probably the reaction of my reaction, or the reaction of the client, the initial reaction at least, would have been more abrupt in this. But I'm quite happy that this one turned out okay.
Sure. And it's because you can look at it from a legal point of view, as you say, make sure everything's in order with the paperwork. But what about surveyors? It's not a bigger thing here in Spain. Does Spaniards get a proper surveyor report?
That's a very good. That's a very good point.
In the UK, it's everyone does it. It's part of the whole thing. It doesn't seem to be here, because we know someone that was that's doing it. English speaking. Yeah. So they're not in this area. There's not many people doing exactly that.
I would like to say that that's because makes on or the quality of the materials in Spain for properties is better than in the UK, but I don't know that. So cannot really.
There was a reputation a few years ago of Spanish built, but it's improved since then.
It's true. No, and I'll tell you that the requirements for the use of materials nowadays are way more strict than they used to be. But anyway, no, joking aside, it is true that it's not customary here. Not being customary doesn't mean that's inexistent. So yes, I have clients now and then that request these kinds. I do normally two kinds of suggestions. The first suggestion is if you buy a flat in a consolidated area and the flat has more than 50 years, then there is something that you can check, which is the ITE report. So the answer to that is if you have a building consolidated urban area and it has several stories and such, and it has more than 50 years, then an official report must be commissioned by the community of owners for the health of the building after 50 years. It's called the ITE report. That report is quite good because it comes with two parts. It comes with a full review of the building, particularly the common areas, but also the facade and the structure. So that covers the apartments as well. You may have a leak, but that's about it. The apartment is not going to crumble upon you. And it comes with a series of measures and expenses that must be taken by the community in order for it to get it approved. And this is mandatory by law. Not every building does it, even though, again, I said it's mandatory. But yeah, so this is something that we normally require. It's very common in Alicante capital city, in which you can find a lot of really tall buildings that are way older than 50 years. The different and more dangerous one is the countryside properties.
Yes.
Right? Because countryside properties are normally built individually and they are really customized, and who knows who built them and stuff like that. And they may be really old or have suffered a lot of renovations. In those cases, a survey can be useful. I am very partial to surveys if one of these two requirements match. The property doesn't have all the documentation and it's old, at least 20, 30 years. And if there has a lot of wooden components.
Right.
Yeah, the wooden components one is because, I had a really bad case of the termites a few years ago, and it has shaped the way I look at properties probably forever. So we do a termite, I do suggest the client to do a termite inspection, or for the seller to give up the certificates, because when you have X amount of wood at the house, you can have, if you want to, as a seller, as an owner of a property, to have yearly or biannual inspections, and then you've got the corresponding certificates, just to know that somebody that knows about it has checked it. And if it's going to be a house that, is unknown or mixed origin, let's say, then I would suggest a surveyor. And there are people that do it, and you can have several kinds of surveys, but at least a basic kind in which they check for cracks and quality of the materials for the finishing elements and stuff like that. That should help you avoid any major structural problems that you may have in the property.
And of course, the other side of things as well is renting in Spain, because it can be tough to get. It's just as tough to find those to rent long term as it is to buy, I suppose, for some areas. And lots of things to look out for. This was an interesting story I saw, and they couldn't really answer it because there's a couple of 3 different things involved about the maximum amount that a landlord can ask for up front.
Yes.
As a deposit, but it's not all deposit, is it? It's split up. How does this work?
That's the thing. So when you are going to rent a flat in the sense that you're going to be the tenant, it is customary for the landlord to request the first a month in advance, because you're moving in, so you pay. Maybe it's the 15th and you're moving in 1 week, so they ask for the first month in advance. But that's rent payment just in advance, and also for another month in a deposit called fianza. It's important to know the word because it's the legal term. And in the Comunidad Valenciana, the fianza has its own system. So once the landlord gets the fianza, you sign a form and it gets filed with the government, with the regional government, and it gets deposited there. So the landlord doesn't keep the money for this deposit, for this fianza. It doesn't keep it. What it does is it puts it on an account by the government. And once the letting is finalized, you have a final inspection, right? Normally, when the landlord comes and you give him like a last tour of the apartment and you give him the keys and such. And at that moment, you must sign a document with him stating how much of the fianza you are going to recover. Why not 100%? Well, fianza is for damages, right? So maybe you look at and there's, something's broken, or the apartment is not properly clean, and you arrange for a cleanup with the landlord, and you agree with the amount for it to be deducted from the fianza. Maybe you get 100%, but maybe not. Anyway, so you've signed this agreement, and then the fianza will get paid partly, right? So either they pay part to you, part to the landlord, or all to you, or all to the landlord, depends. But landlords don't like this too much in general terms. And I think one of the reasons is because they don't have full control of the money. And they don't have it themselves, so they cannot spend it if they wanted to. So it's customary for them to double or triple the fianza, but it's not really all fianza is it anymore, because it's not all paid into the government. So they paid like 1 month's worth, and the other month or the other 2 months goes to the landlord. Furthermore, there is a really wrong practice. This is still going on, which is the 1 month for the agency rule. Yeah. So there used to be, for years and years, particularly in relatively big cities like Alicante and such, although I found it in cities not that big like Heredia, but in which you are going to rent the apartment, and then the landlord tells you, okay, so it's going to be 1 month fianza, 1 month rent in advance, right? And 1 month for the agent, right? You've seen the property because you looked it up online, and then an agent has given you the details, or you have even shown you the flat. So that agent needs to be paid, and the landlord has the idea that that should go out of the pocket of the tenant. But that is actually illegal, and not forever, but it's been illegal since last year, I think. Last year or the year before, I don't remember exactly, but really recently, it was deemed by a law that it's illegal for the agents to charge anything to the tenants. It's the landlord the ones that must pay it. I have to say that although there's a good spirit inside of the law, the idea is like quite good, to favor the tenant that's coming in, and it's a service that the tenant didn't ask for. It's a service hired by the landlord, so the landlord should pay it. In practice, they charge you more or less 1 month's rent for administrative fees, which is the background check that the agent does to you, and the preparation of the documentation for the signing, the contract, and such and such. So it's a covert way of charging you for the agent's fees. So beware, you shouldn't pay that. You should be able to tell the landlord, to the agent, I am very sorry, but any agent's fees, you should charge the landlord. Do whatever you feel like it. If you have to increase the rent for future tenant, then go ahead. But you should factor that in, not charge it separately.
I was reading about the other guarantee. Is it the AWAL or something?
Yes, that's right.
Now, is that the deposit? That because that can be for in case they don't pay the rent for 1 month?
Correct. Yes, there's other ways for the landlords to try and get the money in case the rent is not paid. And it's besides the fianza, there's an aval. Aval is a warranty. Kind of think of it like a bank guarantee, something like that. So you put some money like in escrow in order for the landlord to be able to access it if you don't pay your rent on time. This looks like superficial, but it's not. It's just a transfer to the landlord account. They call it aval, but they could call it just advance payment or whatever. Yes, what is done customarily by tenants to try to minimize these is when the contract is going to expire, you stop paying the rent. I am not advising you to do this, but it is customary. There are people that do it like, okay, how many months in advance I had of fianza or of extra payments or whatever? 2, okay, for the last 2 months I won't pay. This is a really risky legal behavior because if you do that, if the contract doesn't agree with that behavior, you can get sued by the landlord to pay the extra, right? To pay for those 2 months, and you'll fight about the aval thing. But sometimes landlord says, well, okay, and they'll settle for it. Still, it's kind of counter our back practice with another back practice, which is definitely not the solution.
Yeah, and you might get a bit of a black mark against your name as well if you need references to move somewhere else. Then, they tried to pull this.
And that's another thing.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's another thing that's coming on fashion. Besides having a background and for you to check that you have the financial means to support the tenancy agreement that you're signing, they're also trying to ask now for references for past lettings, which is something that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was. Well, we did it for jobs, but definitely not for tenancies. So.
No, you took your chances.
Yeah, you took your chances. Yes, that's true. It's true. You shake the man's hand. I don't know, but there was other ways to try and secure. But there's a lot of fear for squatters here in Spain. Maybe warranted, maybe not. But that comes with extreme measures by the landlords to try and avoid the tenants being, not law-abiding citizens.
So are you able to answer how much maximum they can charge you in advance? Is 2 months of fianza legal or not?
Okay, so the legal maximum is in the sky. There's really not a strict legal limit, right? It's whatever you agree. What they can actually make you pay is just 1 month fianza and normally 1 month payment in advance of the rent. That is what should be the standard, because that's what's fair. That being said, whatever you agree on the contract goes. What they cannot do by law is to charge you for the agency. That's what they cannot do. That's it. So, yes, if you have a landlord say, well, pay 6 months in advance, right? Yeah, or do an aval. If not, I'm not going to rent it to you, and you pay 2 months that are in escrow until the rental is finished, and I'll give them back to you. Yeah, they can do that. They cannot force it onto you. You can just refuse, but they can try. Yeah, definitely.
That was it. I did think I read correctly that the aval, it's not like in the landlord's bank account. They can only get it if you don't pay the rent. They can't get it otherwise.
It's a little bit like the fianza on the government. Yes, it is true. You can set up an aval independently, and when you do, you pay the cost of the aval, and maybe you can even have the bank upfront the money for you for a cost. Yes, that's true. But in practice, what landlords, in my experience, are doing are trying to get the money. They call it different ways, but what they want is just for you to try and transfer as much money into their account in advance as they can.
Yeah, we hear some horror stories about, from the tenant side and the landlord side, but I'm so lucky where I am. I can't believe it. I mean, it was a long time ago, and I wouldn't find anywhere like it now. I saw the sign on the thing and hardly spoke any Spanish. I actually rang him up, just from the phone number that was on the, Alquiler sign. And it's all gone from there. And I think I should be due all my deposit back because I've just fixed everything myself. I think they're quite happy with me in there because I changed light bulbs and fixed fuses and the like.
That's the ideal, isn't it? For you as a landlord to have a tenant that doesn't cost too much for ruckus and pays on time. And for you as a tenant, what you want is a landlord that doesn't overcharge you for stuff and just gets out of your way. And when you request for something to be fixed that's due to the landlord, they fix it, quickly and efficiently and without much of a fuss. That is how it should be. However, it's not always like that.
It's just flown by this. It's really interesting talking about the property side of things, and it would affect most people in the area, one way or the other. And getting onto the renting side as well, what's the latest with evictions? Either that, maybe come on to Ocupas if we get time as well.
Well, that's an excellent point. The evictions have come stronger, harder to make as of late. Yes, there's been a current over the last few years in which they try to make it like speed court, speed things, but that has found an opposition on the left-wing government that we have now, and the current is now moving the other way around. So first was the vulnerability issue. So if you have a tenant that you want to evict, normally you have a reason for it, which is either they are not paying the rent or the contract has expired and you've notified them in time and form, you want to kick them out because, all right. So if they argue that they are in a vulnerable state because they have dependents or they are unemployed or they have, a disability or stuff like that, then they may be able to extend their stay on the property. To give them more time to find an alternative accommodation. Of course, that's a problem for the landlord because if they are not paying the rent or they are overstaying, then you won't get the money until the process is finished, and then, you may have difficulty to get the money if they don't have any money to get.
Sure.
But in any case, it takes more time to evict them. That is how it used to be. Now it's slightly worse. And the slightly worse case is because now you have to try a pre-trial mediation with the other party. That goes with most the civil court cases, so it's not just for evictions. It's almost anything. What the court wants to do is to try and reduce as many court cases and their own workload as they can. And in order to do that, what they do is they do a filter. They used to do it also in work law. So if you get fired and you want to, sue the company for firing you illegally, then you cannot sue them directly. You have to go to a mediation beforehand, and then if that doesn't work, go to court. So that already existed for at least 20 years.
Yes, I think it's called a tribunal in Britain, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing as you have in the UK. But now it's also happening in civil cases. So you have to do a MASC. It's like the English word, but with a C in the end instead of with a K. It's mediación, arbitraje y servicios de conciliación. Right, so a full thing. Anyway, so mediation. So what you do with that is you summon the other party with your terms in order to try and reach an agreement pre-trial. If you are able to prove that you've tried to reach an agreement with the other party and you have been unable to because you don't come to an agreement or because the other party refuses to come to the mediation, then you can proceed to court. But what it does is it gives an extra month and a half to these tenants while you're doing the pre-trial thingy, to these tenants that they are not paying in order to overstay. So, yeah, not looking good.
But there seems to be some sense in that, trying to sort of thrash it out before it goes to court. Settle out of court. That's what they do in other cases, of course.
Of course. No, that...
But
yes.
as you say, it's tough for the landlord if he thinks not going to get anywhere, just banging your head against a brick wall there.
Yes,
literally.
I agree with you. The idea is a very, really good idea. The courts have a lot of caseload, so let's try and reduce litigation in Spain, which has come in something that's been rising and rising over the years. So yeah, why not to try? Even if 1 in 10 cases gets thrown off because people reach into an agreement, then yes. And in fact, it is sadly common to a degree for you to sue somebody and then on the eve of the trial to reach an agreement.
Yeah.
Right. So you haven't actually gone to court, but you've done all the expense. You've hired the lawyer, reunited all the proof. The lawyer has made the lawsuit, has filed the lawsuit. Maybe a pre-trial motion or a pre-trial hearing has taken place, and then before the actual court date, the other party says, "Well, I think I'll pay you." But yeah, you've got a lot of extra costs. But it's possible that you decide to settle in order not to subject yourself to the unbeknownst resolution that the court may give, right? You really don't know what the judge is going to decide. That's impossible to know. So not to chance it and decide, okay, I'll reach, or not, just go until the end. So yes, I hope that these mask procedures, what they do is move that meeting at the entrance of the courthouse to before the lawsuit is actually submitted. However, I don't have much faith that that's going to be the case.
Right, but presumably those are quicker to arrange than a court case and can come up and be carried out sooner.
Yes,
because court cases can take, even the civil ones like that would still take a while.
Yeah, of course. Any court case in Spain is going to take a while without very few exceptions. The evictions used to be, they came to a point they were relatively quick, only a few months, but then you've got the vulnerability thingy, so that made them take way longer, and with the mask it's either a month and a half. But yeah, of course, if you try to have a mediation with the other party and reach an agreement, you can get them out like in a month or a month and a half, of course. And I obviously always suggest, and we always in Pellicer and Heredia, whenever it's possible, we try to reach an agreement with the other party before going gung-ho with the lawsuits out. Yeah, of course. If you can reach an agreement with the other party, it's going to be normally beneficial for everybody. At least for you, it's going to be quick. You may get the amount that you wanted, or maybe a little bit less. But would you compensate that with the gift of time, all the time that you haven't spent actually having to go through that? So yeah, if you can reach an agreement, normally it's preferable. But a lot of people used to do that anyway. So we're not the only law firm that does it. There's all the law firms that also, the professionals that try to avoid going to court if they can, because it's a sinkhole of your life to go now and then. Yeah.
And people sort of think, if you're a wealthy landlord, making all this money from property, but you hear some nightmare stories though of tenants you get, especially if you're turning over, tenants all the time. They're not long term necessarily.
It's really, really important to be really good at choosing your potential tenant, both as the tenant and both as the landlord. So the tenant also has to be, not only they like the property, but also be really aware who's renting it to them, right? Try to get a feel for the other person if you can, to see if they're compatible. Yeah, of course. And I think there should be a blacklist for tenants.
No.
Yeah, I definitely should. If you are a tenant that you are prone to file lawsuits or to be sued because you routinely rent somebody, pay 1 month rent or 2 months, and then stop paying, and you become kind of these inky ocupas that we're talking about. There is tenant and a squatter mixed in one word. Then yeah, of course you should be on a list. So the next landlord that rents the property that you want to rent a property from, they know, and they may take measures, or either don't rent it to you, or they do that under different conditions. But that also will create a second invisible list, which is the list of the good tenants. People that haven't caused problems ever, they just pay faithfully the rent and deserve not to be overcharged with fianzas or avales, extra, or to pay the agents, and just, live their life in peace as tenants. Sure. And, routinely paying the rent.